Bro, you're not staying around? I guess he's leaving. Get close. One thing I do want to chat about while lying on this floor, which, if you're wondering why I'm lying on the floor, first of all, I wanted to get that cute shot with my cat. I thought that'd be adorable. But also, this floor is heated. It's really nice. But I also wanted to talk about generative AI, because that's the only thing that founders are talking about right now, other than FTX, or I suppose Twitter. Anyways, focus. Generative AI. ChatGPT, run by OpenAI, came out, I guess, last week or earlier this week. I don't know, the time has gone so fast. And basically, we're finding that these different AI softwares can create art, they can write things for you, they can do quite a lot of things. And there's a lot of concern and excitement and whatnot over, you know, AI stealing things, or it's a revolution, or it's a tool, or whatever. And I think it's just so fascinating. But that being said, some people are saying like copywriters and writers in general are like now officially out of the job. I don't think that's 100% of the case. However, I think it is gonna make being a writer slightly more competitive. But that being said, I think we're still going to want humans involved in writing, and this is why. The thing with ChatGPT in particular, and a lot of these different writing softwares, is they look for patterns. They look for patterns that people use on an extremely regular basis, and then they copy that, right? So if you ask it to write something about chairs, it's going to take a look at every single thing that has ever been written about chairs and find like what is a very good way to write about it. Like, what's a way that got a lot of responses, what's a way that blah 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 blah. But what it doesn't necessarily do very well is come up with completely novel characters. Doesn't really come up with completely novel word choice. So what I think is gonna happen, and I think it could be really cool for writers, and I don't think writers should be avoiding AI generative software. And I say this as somebody who used to be a comedy writer in New York, okay? I think these AI softwares are still gonna have a rough time coming up with ideas. It's possible that maybe they'll be able to absorb enough of writing and stories and whatever from the internet to be able to put something together, but I doubt it's ever going to really have that personal touch. And so when it comes to maybe just like really redundant writing, things that people do all the time, or like writing an email or whatever, I think ChatGPT is going to be a really good tool. And I think it's going to help writers write faster, which is going to be interesting, right? Like, if I have an idea for a novel or for a script, I could be like, hey, ChatGPT, what would come up if I do this and this and this? And it could be a way for me to either find something that's really out of the box by looking at what the chat comes up with and then figuring out like what is it not even picking up on, you know, what are the gaps that are in there. But it could also, you know, say you're like, I'm really stuck on a chapter or something like that. You could be like, okay, write a chapter that's about this, because I'm a big fan of revising. And so like you could presumably have the chatbot come up with, you know, a few paragraphs or a chapter, or I suppose even an entire book. That would probably be pretty bold. And then, you know, go through and revise it with that human touch, right? And make it that much better. So in that respect, that could mean that a process that takes years takes months or weeks or days, right? That could be really interesting and really cool. I think there's a lot of potential there. I do worry though about writers potentially losing their jobs. That is a real worry, especially for things like news. maybe copywriting in some regard, but I think it's going to take a while. But I think what's going to happen is like a lot of things that are going to come from GPT, you're going to kind of recognize it, right? It's going to become familiar. And the way writers are going to stand out is by coming up with something that's intensely personal or like radically different, you know, coming up with phrases that are so unexpected that these type of AI softwares are not gonna, you know, make them up themselves. One of the most powerful things you can have as a writer, especially as a novelist or a filmmaker or something like that, is having a super distinctive voice. And I think if you can develop your own distinctive voice, that is going to become really, really critical, right? It's going to become a major game changer when it comes to your career. And that with ChatGPT, it's going to be trying to match everybody else. It's going to start to sound really generic. So it might not happen for a while, but I could see like 5-10 years from now, people being like, oh, yeah, a bot wrote that. Maybe that is presumptuous of me. Maybe, you know, these AIs are going to take over the world. But I will say that if you're a writer, I would jump on the bandwagon of these AI softwares sooner rather than later and figure out how to get ahead of that hurdle. I would also very seriously consider diversifying, you know, what you do. All right. So much of storytelling in particular is also strategy. It's also, you know, world building. It's also basically just coming up with novel ideas in general, or connecting the dots from things that, you know, you never would have expected. A few months ago, my engineer Mike and I did a little experiment for fun with an art AI bot thing, where basically we were like, oh, our company's called Home Surfing. Let's try to get a house to surf. And it couldn't figure it out. It didn't understand the concept of a house getting on a surfboard and surfing a wave, right? And so it kept coming with these in-between images. I can put some right here of like a house in waves or a house on top of a wave or like hovering over slightly. It didn't quite get it. And I think it will get it eventually, you know, if we give it better direction and whatnot, but we were being pretty specific. But at the same time, it's not going to be able to come up with weird ideas like that on its own, right? So I think that's where humans come in, is really the ideas, the strategy, and what makes things different. And remember that like perfection in fiction isn't everything. You don't want perfection. Imperfection is what makes people interesting, right? So I would be nervous but not terrified, but really I would embrace it. Listen, if you can cut your writing time in half and like become a better writer because of that, do it, right? So maybe this is unorthodox as like a former creator person. I know a lot of my creative friends are particularly upset when it comes to visual art. I get the concerns there. I think it could be really damaging, but at the same time, the way the software is being built, I think that will become less of an issue sometime soon, where it's just ripping off specific artists, you know, and more, you know, this type of AI is going to become more like people, right? It's going to have seen so many different things that it's going to start to be able to replicate or come up with some things given the right directions. But I would not be afraid of generative AI. I would think it's really, really cool. I think it could be really, really helpful. But don't forget, like, the AI is going to do its best to do everything perfectly. But perfectly isn't necessarily what you want. All right. This angle is now very uncomfortable. I cannot hold this cobra pose for much longer. So, bye.